All right. Okay. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Nightlord, and today I'm going to be talking about blended threat management with specifically the SonicWall security appliance. Blended threat can be taken one of two ways. The term, when I say it, people don't know what I'm talking about. It can either mean a malicious attacker that uses multiple methods to try to compromise the system, multiple aspects, using code and, installing software on your system and all that stuff. That can be classified as a blended threat. And also malicious code that uses multiple methods of attack. One piece of software that uses, all types of different kinds of exploits to compromise your machine. And probably the most obvious is a worm, in the modern sense, because they have little traits from all the different kinds of exploits, viruses, and spyware, and Trojan horses, and all that stuff. So that's really what things are becoming, because more attacks are getting more sophisticated as the security gets more sophisticated. And most of the time, places, they have the layers of security on their network. So right off the perimeter of your internet connection, you usually have a firewall, and then an intrusion detection system, and then some form of antivirus, whether it's client antivirus or hardware-based, and then possibly spyware if it's just the freeware software, or another hardware-based, and VPN sessions for security. They were mostly, you had one box for each thing, or you had a server that ran just the VPN or whatever. So you have these multiple layers that relied on each other for things to work correctly. And you usually have to learn 5 or 6 different systems to be able to administer it. And especially if you're by yourself, then that's kind of a pain in the ass. And what a blended threat management solution is it's one box, one unit that has all that stuff in it. So when you're configuring it, you're looking at the same type of screen. You only have to learn one system and how it works. And most of the time, the software, because it's on the same system, it melds together real easily. And the rules can be traversed between the different systems. And there's a lot of them out there that are these all-in-one units. They've started to spring up more and more within the last year. WatchGuard makes one called Firebox. Some of you may have heard of that. Cisco makes one. Symantec makes one. McAfee makes one. All the major antivirus places or security places make one of these. And I'm going to be talking about the SonicWall. And the SonicWall is the second highest selling security appliance, right under Cisco. And they're a smaller company. I mean, they're big, but these are all over the place. And you may not even know it. So that's kind of the point in this, is if you ever get a chance to see something, you know what you're looking at. Because this is a little different. And the SonicWall is a unit. I mean, it's a rack-mountable unit that goes in your network. And everything's hardware-based. And it runs an embedded operating system. And everything's proprietary, as far as I know. I'm sure that they use some kind of common processing. But I don't know too much about the hardware. I know mostly the stuff about the software, which is what I'm going to be talking about. But it can be used as like an update manager for the client antivirus, because there's a client antivirus that you can purchase to go along with the SonicWall system. And even if that computer is not connected to the internet, but it's still connected to your network, the SonicWall will still update it with antivirus because it handles all the updating for you. So as long as there's a connection, it knows where the different client software is, and it can update it. And it also has a really good logging system. And right out of the box, you get 10 VPN licenses, and you don't have to pay for any more. And that's without adding any of the security services. And this is what it looks like. When you log in as an administrator, this is the first screen you see, and this is the system status screen. And it gives you all the basic information that you want to see right off the cuff. It lets you check the model, your serial number, your authentication code, what version of the firmware you're running, all that stuff. It shows you what security services you have licensed, because you have to license the security services. They don't just come with it. It also shows you the latest alerts. I think it's like the last 5 alerts on the logging system are displayed, so you can view those. And it also shows the state of your network interfaces, because on the front of the unit, there's 4 interfaces. One has to be the LAN, one has to be the WAN, and then there's 2 extra. And I'll talk about them in a minute. Okay, this is the network settings portion, because if you look, I'll go back, maybe, there. If you look on the side, you'll see all these bars. And these are different subsystems inside the unit. So you got your network settings, your wireless stuff, which is proprietary SonicPoint, that's really kind of nice to use, firewall, VoIP, VPN, users, failover, security services, in your logs. There's also a few basic wizards that aren't very helpful. There's only 2 of them. So anyway, the network, the system is something you need to understand about the SonicWall operating system is there's 2 versions. There's the SonicWall OS standard, which you get when you buy the unit. That's the one that comes default, unless you're getting the 4060 or above. And if you get the OS Enhanced, which is the best one, it's an object-oriented operating system for your object. I'll say that. You define all your devices in one spot only. So all your rules that you set for your IPS or your firewall or routing, NAT policies, anything, you only reference the object. So you don't have to worry about it being misconfigured in a million different places. So that makes it really nice. And everything's run that way. You can't make a rule in anything without having an object for it. That's just the building blocks of the system. And that's the big hurdle with the OS Enhanced. A lot of people, when they buy these, they hear Enhanced, and SonicWall explains it to them, and it sounds really scary, the way they talk about it, but they don't describe it like this, which is what it is. So if you know anything about programming, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is the network. When you click on the network tab, it takes you into the interfaces section, and this just shows you your interfaces. And this is what I was talking about. You have 4 interfaces. With the OS standard, you only get to use 3. You can only use 3. And with the OS Enhanced, you can use all 4. And with that, you can have 2 separate internet connections acting as one, which is what we have here. Because you'll notice X1 and X2 are both WAN ports. We have 2 DSL connections connected in that run load balancing, so the bandwidth isn't so intensive. And you also can use the 3rd or the 4th port for DMZ and a few other things that you don't necessarily want to attach to your network. You can also, it'll show if you have SonicPoints on here, it'll show an added interface, a virtual interface, if you have a wireless network. Here's the failover, which is right below the interfaces. And this is, it shows you the primary and the secondary that are assigned. And so it's X1 and X2. And you have to enable the load balancing, and there's a few options. You can either do the basic active-passive failover, which is just failover, it's not load balancing. So X1 goes out, then it automatically routes all the bandwidth to X2. But other than that, it doesn't use them both, it only uses one. And then the per connection round robin is a good basic one. It doesn't take a lot of configuration, and it can tell when one port's being used, so it'll just send it on the other one. And then the communication comes back on that same port. So you don't have to worry about spilling over and the SonicWall passing the packets down a different pipeline. And then the next is the spillover base, and you can say how many kilobytes you want to allow on the primary. And then once it gets over that, then it throws it on the secondary. And then there's the percentage base, which obviously you put a percentage of what traffic. So if you have a faster connection for your primary, then you want to send more traffic down that because you can. So that's that. And then you can also do monitoring. And by default, it checks the WAN status every 5 seconds. So it'll alert you, and it'll activate the load balancing or the failover. And with all these the load balancing, that's automatic failover too. It automatically becomes, if one goes down, everything automatically shifts to the other one. And this is the address objects, and this is where the object-oriented stuff comes in right here, is you have to define all your, and ours is really simple, but down here you'll notice that 1 through 12 you can't do anything with them. Those are the standard ones that come with the system. They don't allow you to edit it. But you can make more just by clicking add. But we have 3 down here that we added, and we have 3 subnets on the network, and then a router that handles all the packet switching. And we created objects for that so we can state in our routing policy where we want stuff to go. So we only have to configure it here. And then for every other rule we apply, we just reference that object. And when you add an object, this is what it looks like. You give it a name, which means nothing, and then a zone assignment. So those are pretty obvious what those are. And then you select the type. It can either be a host range, a network, or a MAC. So 1 unit, a range of units, a whole network, or just one hardware MAC address. And then you just throw in the IP address or the range or whatever, and then your object's made. And this is the routing. And you'll notice here, 4 and 5, this is what I was talking about, the special rules that we made in our routing to go to the separate networks. So we reference that. That is the one object, and there's the gateway, which is the other object that we created. And I skipped over there's a DHCP section, but the page is nothing but the configure button, so I didn't put it on here. Once you hit configure, this is where it takes you, and it's just like any other DHCP. But it's the thing that's nice about it is since it's included, all the rules, if you're given it by name, it knows where everything is, and it does dynamic DNS. So if you use DHCP and you don't have a DHCP server, like you're running a router that's got DHCP, you just use this and it'll accomplish the same thing. But it's pretty simple, start and all that. So, and then the DNS settings and the Win server settings. Okay, now the firewall. It's just like any other firewall. I mean, it's got all the access rules, and you put everything with the objects, because all of these on the objects page that I show you, you'll notice that the LAN, WAN, and all that stuff is an interface, and it's an object. It's another object. So when you're doing all your firewall rules, you reference the object. And the only one, because we don't have any special firewall rules, because by default this thing comes out of the box really secure. I mean, it's got everything off. So the only one they give you to edit is your LAN to WAN, so your internet connection. And the reason why that is, the main reason, is because you can put a schedule on it. And you can say you can only get internet traffic between this time and this time. And that's what that little clock means, because we have it scheduled for work hours only. So people, because we run a manufacturing plant that's got 3 shifts, and we don't want somebody, because there's no supervision at night, and get on the internet and doing stupid stuff. So this is how you add a rule. It's same as everything else. It references the objects. You pick your from and to zone, so that would be your WAN to WAN, WAN to LAN, everything else. And then your service, and there's a service tab for all the different applications you run that need to get through the firewall. So if you're running AIM or something like that, you can create a rule for that. And then your source and destination, how many users are allowed. And you can also set a schedule for this as well. For any other object or access rule that you do, you can set a schedule. And then you can enable logging, and that'll automatically flag your log, so it knows it's been trying to been compromised or denied something. Okay, now this is the fun stuff, because everything up to this point has been really, it's a firewall. It's a router. It's nothing really that fancy. It processes stuff quickly, and it works well together, but that's not what makes the SonicWall good. This is the stuff that really does it, and this is the security services that are built in. And this is all the extra stuff: content filtering, antivirus, intrusion prevention, spyware, email filtering, and real-time blacklist mirroring. And when you go into the section, you automatically come up to the summary, which shows you every security service available, and whether it's licensed or not, and if there's an expiration date on it, because it's by subscription, it'll give you the expiration date, so you know when you have to renew. The security services, I already said them, include all that stuff, and they all work together, just like everything else does. The content filter is fully customizable. You can, just like any other content filter, you can put custom URLs that you want to allow or not allow, things like that. But there's the real way that this thing runs is by categories.